He was the story I was sent to expose, but instead I fell for the man everyone called Sin. Now the city burns with secrets, and the monster I gave my heart to has vanished into the storm, leaving behind only blood, lies, and love too dangerous to survive. If you want to know what happens next, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Your heartbeat might be the only one loud enough to bring Sin back. The city at night smelled of rain and exhaust and secrets, 3 things Eliot had learned to chase the hard way. He liked to tell himself he'd come for truth. That sounded clean, noble. It sounded like a purpose. The truth, however, smelled like something else. Cheap whiskey and cigarette ash, the metallic tang of fear, the velvet hush of a man who had learned to close his face against the world. He stood at the mouth of Eclipse for a long time before letting himself in, pretending to be casual while his palms argued with the weight of the recorder inside his jacket. The club was awound in the city, dark, throbbing, and alive. Bodies moved like tides, laughter used and discarded like coins. At the bar, a woman with a painted smile fed a man whiskey while the DJ wrapped the room in slow, dangerous songs. Eliot's breath hitched at the way the room accepted him, an interloper who moved with just enough confidence to appear ordinary. He had made a file full of lies and a face to hide behind them. Eliot James, freelance writer with a taste for underreported cruelty. In truth, he was softer than his resume suggested. His pencil smudged easily when he wrote late at night. He cried once reading a story about a dog on the subway. But the editor had needed a big name, a risk, and Eliot had been hungry. Hungry was useful, it honed edges. He had only met one member of the Vescary family before that night. On paper, bylines, and the way the city sighed and looked away. The syndicate's right hand was known by a nickname that people used like an invocation: Sin. No one who mattered called him anything else. The stories said Sin had the smile of someone who never regretted anything. The stories said he kept a garden of quiet cruelty. The stories, Eliot thought, were always casualties of whoever survived to tell them. The man who found Eliot near the back of the bar was nothing like the stories. He moved like someone who had practiced being a statue and then made the statue breathe. Dark hair lay flat against a forehead the world had already nicked with too many regrets. His clothes were simple and cut like a promise. The face was beautiful in a way that made Eliot feel his own pulse like a betrayal. When Sin looked at him, the room seemed to dim by courtesy. "You're new," Sin said, and his voice was a low thing that could have been amusement, or a verdict. His hand was gloved, covering the exactness of his fingers. He extended a file toward Eliot as if delivering a tool rather than making an introduction. Eliot took it with hands that trembled but did not show it. The file smelled faintly of tobacco and something floral that seemed like perfume and danger. "I'm Eliot James," he said because he had rehearsed this name until it tasted like nothing. "Freelance. I heard you needed someone to handle documents." Sin watched him like a man watching glass cool. "We don't need much," he said. "We tolerate useful things." He paused as if tasting Eliot with his gaze. "Why are you useful, Eliot James?" The question could have been a trap. Eliot could have offered the practiced lie about ambition, about shining light into dark corners. Instead he gave the truth that felt small and trembling in his chest. "I need a byline," he said. "I need to write something that matters." Sin's lips bent. There was no mockery in it, only a softness Eliot did not expect and was not prepared for. It unhooked something in his chest. He was assigned a role that should have been boring: archival logistics, couriering paperwork, learning the rhythm of a house that ran on whispered orders. In theory he would sit behind doors, record, and leave. In practice he found himself moving through corridors and back rooms where the air smelled of men who had been awake too long. He learned to nod at jokes he did not understand, to laugh at names that were shorthand for violence, to unanswered glances that asked him what he was willing to keep. Sin watched him. It was the way Sin watched that did the work of unraveling habits. There was no grand gesture at first. No sudden rescue from a knife, no proclamation, no dramatic pulling of Eliot away from danger. Sin watched like a weather pattern, slow, inevitable, attentive, until Eliot found himself altering his steps because he expected Sin's shadow to follow. Once, during a late assignment, papers transferred in the back of the club, Eliot fumbled a stack. Small things mattered there too. A dropped envelope could mean suspicion, a raised eyebrow could set people counting enemies. He crouched, palms flat against the floor, cheeks hot with shame. When he looked up, Sin's hand was at his shoulder. "Careful," Sin said, same measured tone. He did not help him to his feet. He did not patronize. He placed a single gloved hand at the small of Eliot's back and guided him away from a man whose eyes were too bright with interest. It was protection that felt like gambling. Eliot's heart lodged in his throat, a caught bird. He had been in rooms before where men made offers he could not refuse. He had never once felt the care in a presence like that, like a man who had learned to shelter fragile things because he understood how much damage could be done by the rest of the world. That night, when he went home, Eliot lay awake thinking of Sin's hand at his back. His small apartment smelled of paper and cheap coffee. He ran his own hands along the bedsheet where the leather touched his skin in memory and realized he knew the texture of a glove he had only glimpsed. It was ridiculous, unprofessional, dangerous, the kind of feeling he would have scoffed at if it belonged to someone else. But the sensation did not ask for permission. It settled into him like a fever. The job asked him to be brave. Love, he learned quickly, was not brave so much as stubborn. It persisted under better names and worse. Eliot told himself his notes were for the paper. He told himself Sin was merely another data point. He told himself that a man like Sin, made of careful shadows and cruel jokes, could never be anything but a story with fangs. And yet Sin laughed once at the back of the club in a way that looked like a confession. Eliot was near the dartboard, pretending to be occupied as he catalogued men who came and went. The laugh was small but honestly surprised. It softened the crease between Sin's brows. He looked at Eliot then, not with appraisal but with something like shock. "You're terribly honest for someone who's hiding," Sin said later, leaning against a hallway that smelled of perfumed smoke. He let Eliot read that sentence like a benediction or an indictment. "Honesty gets you killed more often than it saves you." Eliot swallowed. "Do you think I'm honest?" "I think you are easy to find inside a crowd," Sin said. "And that terrifies people like me. We prefer the ones who are harder to see." It was a line that felt like an accusation and a promise. Eliot's fingers curled around the recorder in his pocket as if to anchor himself to the lie he had come in with. He did not give Sin the truth, that he had wanted to be found, that he had liked the idea of someone reading him like an open book and choosing to stay. Days passed. Eliot catalogued invoices and delivered files. The recorder lived in the seam of his jacket like a second heartbeat. He took notes in a leather-bound notebook as much to remind himself that he was still a journalist as to preserve reality for a future article. He measured men's habits, their tics, the way some of them kept their shoulders too high as if to guard against a world that was always trying to yank them apart. Sin's attention was a weather system that changed his days. Sometimes it meant the coldest looks in a crowded hall. Sometimes it meant a chair dragged across the room and placed opposite Eliot's at a table. Silent company, nothing more. Once, when a junior enforcer mouthed a crude joke, Sin's hand was on Eliot's wrist so quick the other man flinched first. It was almost incidental, an instinct before a decision. But Eliot felt it like a hand on his life. "We are not kind people," Sin said once when they closed the office and the city sighed beyond the windows. The world outside their little island seemed oblivious to the things that shaped men inside. "Kindness is expensive where we live." Eliot wanted to ask what Sin paid for kindness in the currency of his world, but instead he answered with another small truth. "Sometimes kindness is the only honest thing left." Sin's eyes found his and held. For a second, Eliot saw the man behind the nickname, the angle of a jaw that had been hit and forgiven, the tired set of a mouth that had given up on easy smiles. He also felt, with the gentle terror of someone closing a book on the last page, that there was nothing in Sin's life that could be called safe for anyone else. "You will learn," Sin said almost tenderly, "what happens to people who try to fix broken things instead of burning them down." He stepped closer until the air between them was a narrow thing, charged and intimate. "If you stay." Eliot's throat hurt with the truth that had started as a lie. "I'm staying," he whispered, and the words felt like a surrender that arrived too late to be noble. Sin's hand brushed the side of Eliot's face, gloved, sure, and more reverent than caress. It left a warmth where leather met skin. For a heartbeat, Eliot imagined a life where the city could not reach them, where hands were honest instruments rather than weapons. The thought was a slow, hungry ache. When he left the club that night, the rain had started, small, polite drops that would become a downpour by dawn. In the reflection of the window, Eliot saw himself look back at him. A young man with a recorder in his coat and a person he was not yet brave enough to be. He walked home with the file against his chest like contraband, like a heart he had taken for examination and could not return. The city hummed. Somewhere, distant and inevitable, machinery turned. Inside the shadowed rooms of the Vescari family, plans were being made, loyalties counted, and sins tallied. Eliot did not yet know where he would fall on the reckoning. He only knew the lightness of a hand on the back of his neck and the heavy promise in a voice that tasted of smoke. If the world wanted to call that man Sin, Eliot thought, then let it. Names could be knives or they could be prayers. He tucked the recorder closer, and as the rain thickened into sound, he made himself a vow beneath the city that had already claimed so many things. He would find the truth. He would write it. And he would remember the way Sin had looked when he'd first asked why Eliot was useful, as if usefulness were the most intimate thing of all. Eliot had stopped pretending he was only there for the story. He still carried his recorder, still scribbled in his notebook when no one was watching, but the words no longer made sense. They weren't about the mafia or the deals or the crimes. They were about him, the man everyone called Sin. Sin had become the gravity of Eliot's world. Every glance felt like a question. Every silence an answer he didn't dare speak aloud. Sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, Eliot wondered if Sin could hear his heartbeat when they stood too close. It always betrayed him, loud, frantic, like a trapped bird fluttering against its cage. That night the city felt too still. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy and damp, like the world was holding its breath. Eclipse was closed early, something rare, something dangerous. Eliot found Sin alone in the office upstairs, sitting by the window with a cigarette burning slowly between his fingers. The smoke curled toward the ceiling like a ghost. "You shouldn't be here," Sin said without looking at him. "I couldn't sleep." Sin's reflection on the glass looked tired, beautiful, but fraying at the edges. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his hair disheveled, his gun resting carelessly on the desk. Eliot hesitated by the door. "You're expecting trouble?" "There's always trouble," Sin said softly. "It just wears different faces." He turned then, his eyes meeting Eliot's, sharp at first, then softening as though the sight of him hurt. "You really don't belong in a place like this." Eliot managed a small, trembling smile. "Then why haven't you sent me away?" Sin took a slow drag from the cigarette, then crushed it out. "Because I can't." The confession hung in the air, fragile and real. Eliot stepped closer, drawn as if pulled by something inevitable. Sin didn't move, only watched him approach, his expression unreadable. "Why do you let me stay?" Eliot asked. Sin exhaled slowly. "Because when you're here I forget what I am." Eliot's chest tightened. "And what are you?" Sin smiled faintly, the kind of smile that broke hearts because it didn't know how to stay. "A man too far gone to deserve this." "This?" Eliot whispered. Sin's voice dropped lower. "You." The room went quiet. Outside, the city lights flickered like dying stars. Inside, everything felt suspended, two people standing on the edge of something too dangerous to name. Eliot's hand trembled as he reached out, brushing his fingers against Sin's sleeve. "You don't get to decide what you deserve," he said softly. Sin's eyes closed. For a moment he didn't breathe. Then he caught Eliot's hand, not roughly, not gently, but like a man afraid it might disappear if he didn't hold it right. "Eliot." It was the first time Sin had ever said his name like a prayer. They moved closer without meaning to. One step. Then another. Eliot could feel the warmth radiating off Sin's body, could smell the faint trace of smoke and cologne on his skin. When their foreheads touched, it felt like a surrender. "You should leave," Sin whispered, even as his hand slid to the back of Eliot's neck. "I don't want to." Sin let out a shaky breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "You're a terrible liar, little lamb." Eliot smiled faintly. "Then you should know I'm telling the truth." And then he kissed him. The first touch was hesitant, a question, an apology, and a promise all at once. But once Sin responded, the world seemed to tilt. The air between them burned. The kiss deepened, slow and desperate, the kind that stole breath and gave it back as something new. Sin's hands framed Eliot's face, thumbs brushing against flushed skin. Eliot's fingers clung to Sin's shirt, pulling him closer as if he could anchor himself in that impossible warmth. There was no rush, only the slow unraveling of years of restraint, the quiet sound of rain beginning again outside, the heartbeat of two men who had spent too long pretending they were made of stone. When Sin finally pulled back, his breath trembled against Eliot's cheek. "This shouldn't happen," he murmured. "Then stop me," Eliot whispered. Sin didn't. The night blurred after that, not in chaos but in softness. Sin's voice dropped to a murmur against Eliot's skin, each word heavier than the last. Eliot didn't remember who reached for whom first. He only remembered the way the room seemed to breathe with them, the sound of fabric, the warmth of skin, the silence that followed every gasp. There were no promises, no vows. Just touch, slow, reverent, terrified. Sin kissed him like a man who knew how much it would hurt to remember. Eliot touched him like someone trying to prove that even broken things could feel. Outside, thunder rolled again. Inside, they moved as if trying to outrun the noise. When it was over, they stayed close, tangled in silence, the world outside erased by the rhythm of their breathing. Eliot's head rested against Sin's chest, listening to the uneven thrum of a heartbeat that didn't belong to a monster after all. For the first time since he entered this world, Eliot felt safe. And that frightened him more than anything. "Does it always feel like this?" Eliot whispered into the dark. Sin's hand moved slowly through his hair. "Like what?" "Like you're falling." Sin was quiet for a long time before answering. "Yes, but it's not the fall that kills you. It's the moment you realize you don't want to stop." Eliot smiled sadly. "Then I don't ever want to stop." Sin laughed, soft, aching. "You have no idea what you're saying." "Maybe not," Eliot murmured, "but I mean it." Sin turned to face him, eyes dark and searching. "Then God help us both." He kissed Eliot's forehead, lingering there for a moment longer than necessary. They didn't sleep much. The night felt endless, sacred. When dawn finally bled into the city, pale light spilling through the window, Sin looked different. Softer, almost human. He traced a finger along Eliot's jaw, as if memorizing every line. "If I could keep one thing from this world," he said quietly, "it would be this." Eliot caught his hand. "Then keep it." Sin smiled, but there was sadness in it. Some things can't be kept, only remembered. Eliot wanted to argue, to ask what he meant, but Sin kissed him again, slow and final, and the argument died in his throat. By the time Eliot drifted into sleep, the city outside had begun to stir. He dreamed of rain and smoke and a voice whispering his name. When he woke, Sin was gone. Only the faint scent of him remained, and on the pillow beside him, a single black glove folded neatly as if left behind on purpose. Eliot stared at it for a long time, his chest tight with something he didn't have words for. He didn't know it yet, but the world was already shifting. The quiet after love was only the calm before betrayal. Morning came too soon. Eliot woke to the sound of rain and the echo of Sin's voice still tangled in his dreams. The space beside him was empty, only a black glove, a cold imprint on the sheets, and the faint scent of smoke remained. He sat there for a long moment, his body still humming from the night before, his mind fighting the truth clawing its way up his throat. He had crossed a line he could never uncross. He had given himself to the man he was meant to destroy. By the time he reached the bar that afternoon, Eclipse had come alive again. Guards at the door, laughter too loud, the heavy bass of music shaking the floor. It was like the night before had never happened. But Sin wasn't laughing. He stood by the balcony overlooking the crowd, hands in his pockets, watching everything with that quiet, dangerous calm Eliot had come to recognize. When he saw Eliot, something flickered in his eyes, not softness, not warmth, but something unreadable. "Rough night?" Eliot tried to joke, though his voice betrayed him. Sin didn't answer. He gestured for Eliot to follow him upstairs. The office felt colder than before. Rain streaked the windows, painting ghostly lines across Sin's reflection. Eliot could feel the storm inside him gathering again, the one he thought they had silenced the night before. Sin poured 2 glasses of whiskey, slid one across the desk and said quietly, "You lied to me." The glass froze in Eliot's hand. His heart stumbled. "What?" Sin looked up, eyes dark, no anger yet, just the quiet certainty of a man who already knew. "You lied. About your name. About who you are. About why you're here." Eliot's throat went dry. "Sin, Don't," Sin interrupted. His voice was sharp, but his hands trembled slightly as he set his own glass down. "Don't insult me with another lie." Eliot's chest felt like it was collapsing. "I didn't mean to, it wasn't supposed to go this far." Sin laughed then, a low, bitter sound that didn't reach his eyes. "You're a journalist, Eliot. You came here for a story. To expose me." Eliot couldn't breathe. The words fell like stones. "I was supposed to. But then I met you." "Don't?" Sin's voice cracked, not in rage but in something worse. "Babe." He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You think I don't know what this world does to people like me? You think I haven't seen betrayal before? But you," he looked back at Eliot, his expression raw. "You were the one person I didn't want to be right about." Eliot stepped forward, desperate. "Please, Sin, listen to me. It started as an assignment, yes, but I stopped caring about the story the moment I—" Sin's jaw tightened. "The moment you what?" Eliot's voice broke. "The moment I fell for you." Silence. Outside, thunder rolled, low and distant. Sin stared at him, breathing hard. "You think love erases what you've done? That it rewrites the truth?" "No," Eliot whispered. "But it's real." Sin's eyes softened for a heartbeat, just a heartbeat, and then the sound came. A sharp crack of glass from downstairs. Shouts. The unmistakable chaos of boots storming through the front entrance. Eliot's blood ran cold. The raid had begun. Sin moved fast. He grabbed his gun from the desk, every trace of hesitation gone. They're here for me. Eliot's breath caught. Sin, listen. You knew, Sin said quietly. Not a question. A realization. Eliot shook his head violently. No, I didn't know it would be now, I swear. They must have moved early. Please, Sin, you have to run. Sin laughed again, this time colder. Run where, Eliot? To the arms of the man who betrayed me? I didn't betray you. Eliot shouted. I love you. The words tore through the chaos like a confession shouted into a burning church. Sin froze just for a second. His expression faltered. Then he stepped closer until they were face to face, the air between them thick with smoke and sirens. You don't get to say that, he whispered. Not after this. I mean it, Eliot pleaded, tears in his voice. I don't care what happens, I just. Sin silenced him the only way he knew how, with a kiss. Hard, desperate, and full of everything they couldn't say. For a heartbeat the world stopped. Then the gunfire began. The window behind them shattered as bullets tore through the office. Eliot ducked, pulling Sin down with him. The room filled with smoke and shouting. Sin fired back twice, his movements sharp and fluid. He looked like what he was, a man born in violence, forged by survival. But his eyes kept flicking to Eliot as if checking that he was still breathing. Go, Sin said between shots. You can still get out. I'm not leaving you. Sin's jaw clenched. You already did. Eliot shook his head, crawling toward him. Please don't say that. A bullet shattered the desk. Sin grabbed Eliot and pulled him behind cover, shielding him with his body. Eliot felt the jolt, the sudden stillness before he even saw the blood. Sin. Sin didn't respond at first. He pressed a hand to his side, red staining his shirt. His breathing hitched, but his eyes stayed sharp. Listen to me, he said hoarsely. When they find you, say you were just a hostage. Do you understand? No. Eliot's voice broke. We can make it out together? Sin smiled faintly, blood on his lips. You always were a bad liar. He brushed a trembling hand against Eliot's cheek. Remember what I said, about falling? Eliot nodded through tears. Sin's gaze softened. Then don't stop now. Before Eliot could answer, Sin pushed him backward, hard. The office door burst open as police stormed in, shouting commands. Eliot hit the floor, coughing from the smoke, his vision spinning. When he looked up, Sin was gone. The broken window yawned open to the rain and the chaos below. Sin. Eliot screamed, crawling toward the edge. But there was nothing, only the rain, the sirens, and the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Someone grabbed him, a police officer shouting his name, but he didn't hear. His mind was a blur of blood, smoke, and the memory of Sin's last touch. Sin had vanished into the storm, leaving only his name behind. And for the first time, Eliot understood what it meant to love something that was never meant to last. The city felt hollow. Eliot moved through its streets like a ghost, numb to the crowds, the traffic, the laughter that still seemed too loud. Rain streaked the windows of cafes and offices, washing the neon lights into ghostly trails that mirrored the ache in his chest. Every reflection in the glass reminded him of Sin, the curve of his jaw, the way his eyes caught the light, the faint scent of smoke and rain that clung to him like a memory. Eliot had tried to write it all down, the truth of the syndicate, the evidence he had gathered, the story that would have ended everything. But the words felt empty, meaningless now. The story was not his. It had belonged to Sin. Days bled into nights. He couldn't sleep. Every sound made him flinch, a door slamming, footsteps on the stairs, a laugh too sharp in the dark. He replayed the night of the raid over and over in his mind. The way Sin had pushed him back, blood on his shirt, hands trembling just enough for Eliot to feel it. The way Sin had whispered, "Remember what I said, about falling?" The way he had vanished into the storm, leaving Eliot screaming into the rain. He remembered everything. And it hurt too much to bear. Eliot returned to Eclipse once. The club was closed, charred in places, a skeleton of its former life. The walls were blackened, the floor littered with glass and debris. He ran his hand along the window ledge where Sin had stood. The surface was cold and damp, slick with rainwater, but it smelled faintly of him. Eliot pressed his forehead to the glass and whispered, "Sin, please come back." There was no answer. Only the echo of the city, indifferent and cruel. The article he wrote went live weeks later. It made headlines. He became famous overnight, a young journalist who had dared to expose the Vescary syndicate from the inside. The editors praised him. Awards were sent. Invitations to panels and interviews arrived. Eliot accepted none of it. All he could see when he closed his eyes was Sin, bloodied, laughing, alive one moment, gone the next. He tried to convince himself it was over. That Sin was gone. That the man he loved was a ghost, a beautiful illusion swallowed by the world he had always inhabited. But ghosts have a way of leaving traces. Sometimes a shadow moved just right across the street, and Eliot swore he saw Sin's silhouette. Sometimes a laugh carried on the wind, low and familiar. Sometimes in the quiet of his apartment, Eliot would wake to the faint scent of smoke and rain. Every time his heart leapt. Every time it shattered again. Eliot began retracing the night of the raid, piece by piece. He went back to the streets, the alleyways, the rooftops, anywhere Sin might have gone. The police had found nothing. No body. No trace. It was as if he had dissolved into the storm itself. Eliot asked questions. He followed whispers and rumors. Every lead ended in shadows, every trail led to silence. He refused to accept that Sin was gone. He couldn't. One rainy evening, Eliot was walking the streets near Eclipse, his coat soaked, hair plastered to his forehead. The neon signs reflected in the puddles like shattered glass. His phone vibrated. A text. No number. No name. You were right. Sin doesn't die that easily. Eliot froze. His heart pounded so hard it nearly knocked him to the ground. He looked around, the streets were empty. Rain hissed on the asphalt. Another message came. Come find me, little lamb. Eliot's breath caught. His fingers trembled over the screen. He didn't know where to go. He didn't know what he was being invited into. He only knew one thing: Sin was alive. And for the first time since that night, a dangerous thrill surged through him. He had no plan. No allies. No certainty. Only a single, obsessive truth. He would find him whatever the cost. The rain poured harder, washing the streets in silver. Shadows moved at the edge of Eliot's vision. Every step forward felt like stepping into a world where nothing was safe, nothing was permanent. Yet he walked on. The city had swallowed Sin once. It could swallow him again. But Eliot would chase him through fire, through storm, through the ruins of everything he had known. Even if it killed him. Even if it destroyed him. Even if Sin never wanted to be found. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the reach of sight or reason, a figure watched. A figure that moved like smoke, silent and untouchable. A figure whose eyes glinted with a dangerous, knowing light. A figure whose name was Sin.